I wanted to talk about, in this video, about the experience at SeaWorld with my father and mother. I began narrowing down even more and more my mother's expressions. And this is the event that played. Lupe could probably verify this, but I don't even, like I said, I don't trust her at all. She knew about Frankie's rapes and never told my mother. And so, like I said, but I think it's important for me to talk about because, you know, she is my mother, and brain damage that's now that's happened to her brain, and whatever conditioning morph that they have molded her to benefit Ken and Sarah Cooper, I can't do anything about anymore. But the person that I knew is no longer there, and but I think it's important for me to talk about because when we went to SeaWorld, my mother had just gotten a car and she seemed fairly excited, like somebody bought her a car, and I remember that. Well, this is the event that when we were by the dolphins, and I feel like somebody's shooting me, like I'm having a stroke. They're shooting me with some sort of electronic device right now. When we went to SeaWorld, the way that my mother kissed or pecked my dad was that of like I don't want to, like okay, I don't have to. It was very resisting. If it didn't seem worse, when I went to go ask for a few more dollars, because my mom gave me, I think my mom gave me like $3, 3 ones, and Luca was there, and my dad was sitting on the bench. My mother was mother was looking at my father, and she looked like she was completely like. You ever seen the expression of a woman that, like, she can't do anything for you, but she's like no, like, and you could see the expression on her face. And she was standing next to him, and she was standing like this. She was like, kind of not. I don't know if her hands were closed, but she was standing just like this, of some form, like, and doing like shaking her head. And my father kept on resisting by like, I'm still a man, like, oh, it's, my wife, I got my wife, together. And this is kind of what he was doing, and this is kind of where it became frightening. And I remember kind of getting nervous, a slight nervous, because this is the behavior of an old man that has severe brain damage. It seems to be very reluctant to think that he can still take care of himself, and he can't. But he still is eagerly to continue his life. He's still very eagerly to want to continue his life, in the sense of I still have a family and a wife and kids. That's what I get, and he can't. So, like I said, I think it's important for me to talk about, because this is, I don't know how my mother, like, I remember walking with her, she was very like, I'm doing this for the kids in our family, but I don't want this old man. And I remember my dad was still wanting to, like, continue. And so I think it's important for me to talk about. There's no verification. There's not really much you can do anything about this other than the other investigators that were probably there. I don't know. I don't know what the situation was, but my mother obviously kissed my father in public, and my father still thinks, they realize this guy is gay, but he's just giving a peck to a gay man, but that's not the case. My mother, I remember my mother. The way that I remember us in the house, I felt that my mother felt like she had to. Like she had, like it was a procedure, like that's what we have to do in order to keep this family together. Not that she wanted to. Because, my dad was really old. How are you going to sleeping? My biological father which was a pretty handsome looking man, very strong and healthy, to want to have sex with him, they had no choice but no place to go to, and you have forced to have sex with that 80-year-old man that drinks, doesn't work out, and smokes cigarettes his whole life and has false teeth. you know, for my mother's personal sex life, my mother's personal relationship with a significant loved one, it is beyond anything of, nobody was ever going to want my mother. Nobody, no man is ever going to want my mother. And they're going to train her and beat her to whatever person it is. Not only have I felt that I could have helped my mother in any form with a team of people that thought, well, we see what dating things they can do for my mother. No, they did this because my mother had been mutilated for so many fucking years. That's why. So, you know, they know nobody's going to want my mother. They'll gut her out. That Barack Obama and Michelle are fucking laughing. They're just fucking my mother in the ass. That's what they're fucking doing. They're laughing, and they want to act like heroes that they did anything because they don't want to pull the trigger. Nobody can pull the trigger on a cop and a detective and pin them down like the worthless scumbag pieces of shit that they were. You know, Kenneth at the radio station, because they're broadcasting this, and Kent Craig still works at the radio station. What fucking things do you think he's broadcasting that if that's all black radio station? That's exactly what the fuck he's doing. And he's very connected to Kenneth. So, like I said, you know, I thought I'd talk about that, and I wanted to talk about something else. About Selena. I recently just got a picture that was sent to me from Selena, and I when I first met Robert Zarate, I was 12. Yeah, I was 12 years old, and it was like right before my dad committed suicide. I think it was. It was like right before he committed suicide. It could have been. I could have just turned 13 years old, but I remember it was somewhere like in a January or December, because I remember Robert Zarate, who passed away in a car wreck with Edward Rangel, who had an identical twin. The way that I met him was we were in 6th grade, and I really didn't like him at all at first. I didn't like him at all first, and you know, he was very expressive, and he was very thugging. He was not scared. You could tell that wherever he came from a very hard background, because he was not scared to express himself, and like just totally cool. Like, and he didn't know anybody there. Remember, everybody in our grade in school, we all grew up from like 2nd grade to 3rd grade to 4th grade, and we all kind of shifted around all throughout school. And he had never gone to this school before, and we're all like, he was 11 years old. And I think like the first day that he showed up to school, he brought his Power Rangers backpack. You can tell, you can talk to Daniel Box and Barry Pan about this. He was a kid, right? He was a kid, but we're all trying to learn how to be cool, right? How to grow out of being a kid, you know? But he brought a Power Rangers backpack a few days, and I think he then bought another backpack, you know, a couple of days or something. And he was dressed fairly nice. He was dressed, he was fairly dressed very nice. Robert Zarate liked dressing nice at 10, 11 years old, with nice looking boots and some nice pants and a nice dress shirt. He liked nice clothes. He's always was like that. Robert Zarate was a fan of nice clothes, good, clean clothes, a good looking style, like Office or like, you know, Banana Republic or all these sort of mix and matching. He liked to have wear nice clothes, more than anyone that I've ever known, and more than anybody of his financial wealth. You know how some people, they live in a $100,000 house, you know, $100,000, $50,000 house. They live in a $100,000 house, but they dress like they're millionaires, like the clothes and stuff. That's how he kind of was, and he liked to do that. Well, the way that I met him is we're walking home, and we started to talk a little bit, and we started just talking, and we were walking home the same road where I saw President Barack Obama waving at me at that big house. And after, you know, because we walk home the same direction and same way, and I'd be walking home alone sometimes with Julian. I remember, because Julian would walk with his friends, you know, with a couple of his friends, or with Medellin. He always walked. Most of the time, sometimes I walked with him. But I was walking with Robert this specific day, and after maybe 3 days, we're walking. I goes, "Oh, where do you live?" I goes, "Yeah, I live down over there." He goes, "Yeah, I live over there." And then on a Friday one day or something like that, he goes, "Hey man, what, you want to come over to my house?" And he was very, very eager to have me a part of his life. Very eager. I had never met anybody that wanted me a part of their life ever like that in my life. I always went to friends' houses, and I had been accepted and welcomed by a lot of friends. Richard Murphy was very welcoming as well. Was always, but I had never really come across somebody that was like wanting to be my friend, and matching with our background in life in this particular type of fashion, because he had an old dad. I walked there, I didn't know where his mom was. And he goes, "Wait, where's your mom? How's your dad?" My mom, I think that's what I don't know how he came off of it. Obviously, it's a very just, hurtful thing, but he goes, "Oh, I don't know." He didn't want to talk about it at first. It took him a little while before he didn't want to say anything. And his dad didn't come home until like 6 o'clock. 5 or 6, it was already almost dark by the time. It was like right before sunset, and he would show up, and he got off work, and I would be playing video games with Robert Zarate and Sega Genesis. I still remember playing Deion Sanders, which is the game that he liked. I thought the game kind of sucked, but I was like, let's play some other games. But he had Luminous, I think it's called. It was one of his favorite games. Anyway, we're playing video games, and he had a little treasure box. You can talk to Daniel Box about this. He had a treasure box looking, and it's his TV sitting on top of it, and he had a very nice looking bed, furniture. It was very nice. It looked like it came out of a rent-a-center. It looked like everything was brand new, and he was home alone, and we just played video games. And he was like, "Oh man," he was like, "Oh man," and I remember his dad comes. He goes, "Oh," he goes, "Who's this? Is your friend? Oh, you got you a cute one, man. You're a cute looking kid." I was a very cute looking kid as a child. My Dr. Tang used to always tell me that as a kid. I was very adored. I was a very, very adored. I was like a commercial kid when I was a little kid. If you look at pictures of me and video when I was like 5, 4, I was like a commercial kid. I was a very beautiful looking child, and anyway, and he just looked at me. I'm 13 years old, and I'm like, oh, and I'm very still to anything that anyone might, think, but because I don't ever know who they are, and all the lights were turned off, and I think he had like a light turned on only in his room. He goes, "Oh, it's my dad. Is your dad?" And that's how we met. Go to his house, and then I walk home, and that was pretty much how and his dad, after a couple of visits, we just go home and play games for an hour or two. And then his dad would call him. He'd call his dad on his phone and say, "Hey," because his dad worked in Oak Cliff, and he'd always bring these burgers from the hood. For those that live in the hood, when you live in the hood, it's old school hamburgers. They have it's old school hamburgers where they have paper bags. They have paper bags, sandwich burgers that's filled with grease at the bottom, and old school fries with the soda and potato chips. I'm sorry, it doesn't come with French fries. It comes with a bag of chips, either Cheetos. He always got it came with Cheetos or Ruffles, but it came like the burger was like old school. Like it looked like somebody was naturally cooking it from their backyard, kind of like, but it was a restaurant back in the hood, because those are the type of restaurants that they had back in the hood in Oak Cliff, in the ghettos. And he would bring that, and he was like, "All right," and he would bring me something to eat. And he goes, "Oh man, these burgers are good." And so he was really excited. Robert was always very excited and kind of like, "Hey, look, I can show you this. I can show you this. Look what I got. I can, to share." He was very sharing. And after maybe about 2 weeks, it wasn't very. I'm gonna say it was like 2 weeks. Started going to his house like every other day, and then I started going every day. And then we'd go and play video games. And he told me, he goes, yeah, he goes, my sister might move in. He goes, your sister? You have a sister? Yeah, she hasn't moved in yet. Yeah, she's gonna move in over there. Yeah. I go, I don't know. And I remember him being very excited to have Alicia move in. He was very excited. He was like, oh, like, he goes, yeah, I got a sister. He goes, yeah, she's gonna move in. I hope she moves in. And he was very, very thrilled to have a sister. He really was. And I remember I think it was like it was probably a couple of months, I want to say, a month or two. It was maybe a month or two, couple of months before all of a sudden she showed up. And he goes, oh yeah, my sister moved in. And then I met Alicia. And she had an elegant room. She came from Oak Cliff. I don't know what the story to this ever was. In their life. But that's how it happened, and so we started hanging out. It wasn't Robert Zarate Sr. did not get together. He stayed single the whole time. He was by himself. He was single the whole time, and he was single to the idea of just being single, because he said, I remember he had said it took him probably like 6 months or a year after I met him. He said that his wife died. His wife died, and that left him single. So what happened is that I was probably like 14 to I was 13 years old when he first told me. It didn't take very long for him to tell me his first wife passed away, which is Robert's mother. And Robert didn't tell me that until, I don't know, Robert's mother died until like a couple of months. I think he may have said something. He said something about whenever in school when we were about it, I think, but I wasn't around the crowd, and I'm not sure if I heard him correctly. So he ended up after like a couple of months. I remember I asked about his mom, like, what about your mom? Like, where? And he was kind of just like, oh, I don't know. And he wasn't like angry. He was just like, you could tell he was emotional about it, but hard in emotion, but very welcoming to how I was when I was there. And so this is where we become best friends. And there was the first friend he made. He used to always talk, oh man, Barry Pan was the first friend I ever made here. And then Daniel Box. I don't even know how Daniel Box showed up in the picture, because by this time I think Daniel Box was like going to Barry's house, and then they met. So I met Robert and became friends, and very shortly after, I don't know how they met, but they started hanging out with each other all the time. We were all very close friends, and I think it was because Brian and Barry Pan, that's how they met. But anyway, we were all, that's how we became friends. And he told me his mother died, and he showed up, and it wasn't until I was about, 16? I was probably 16 years old when Selena showed up. Because I remember going to, when I was 15 years old, I was going to DeWitt Perry, and there was a couple of times where I went over to Robert's house early in the morning and his dad made like some taquitos and, some food, which is always abundant to everything we're doing. Food was always a very common treasure at his house. We went there, had some breakfast, and come on, we gotta go to school, man. All right, come on. And so we go together, and I remember being 15 years old, and I was at DeWitt Perry, and Selena had moved in. So I want to say she was about 16. I was 16 years old, somewhere around 16 years old to maybe 17 when she moved in. And at first, I remember that when I was 15, she showed up a couple of times. So there was a couple of times when I knew the personal arguments. I was there when it happened. You don't understand that I saw when Robert Zarate didn't feel comfortable Selena showing up, and he said something bad to her or gave her bad looks, and then Robert Zarate showed up with his belt and hit his son a couple of times. And I remember him, like, his eyes turning really red. And so I don't know what Robert Zarate's circumstances of life ever was, but I do remember that, and I remember he didn't like Selena in the beginning. And I felt that the reason it was, which I didn't hate him, and I didn't hate her. I just didn't know the circumstances because we were there. Daniel Box was there. Yeah, Daniel Box was there the day that he got mad in front of all of us, and his dad went in his room, and he slapped him grabbed his belt, and he hit him once on his leg where he was laying on the bed, and his eyes were turning red, and we were just like all scared. You know, we're like, as kids, you don't want to see your friend get hit with the belt. You know, it's like, fuck. And Daniel was there, and we didn't say anything. I want to say Daniel was there, and yeah, and we were all like sort of shaking and nervous, like, damn, right? And but anyway, he goes and I think it was because he gave her a dirty look. But I understand the dilemma of families, but that was their family, okay? So I was very close, dwindled close to the family, to Robert Zarate and Senior Zarate, and saw a lot of the experiences with Alex and Alicia and her boyfriends, and her sneaking out the window, and then Robert's dad getting mad because I can't let you live here if you go somewhere to pay rent and you're sneaking out of the house to go smoke weed, and I bought you all these nice things. And she did. She had a nice queen size bed and everything. She had all these nice things, and which is great. She very much looked like she got a princess, kind of like a queen size room with her own bathroom, for herself. Anyway, life is really great, and the dad took us to church, and I could never really find anything bad about Mr. Zarate. There was nothing really bad about him. There really wasn't. There was not very much, if any. I mean, he was a very good person to me, very kind and very mentoring, and almost kind of like he really liked me because the Hispanic race and the fact that I was around Robert, like we were the two Mexicans. He comes from the hood too, and his wife died first. His first wife died like my dad's first wife died, and so his dad was old, like my dad was old. So we had a very familiar with having a relationship with someone that's very old, that is a father figure. And we shared that very commonly, and we understood that, and we channeled very, very well with that. I was in there when Barry Pan and Robert Zarate would like be, wrestling, and then it got serious, and then Barry would punch, Robert, and Robert get pissed off and he started punching, and then Barry starts walking all crying and shit. And then the next day, 2 days later, they're friends. Like, I'm not joking. 2 days later, they're best friends. Like, all right, man, come on, you can come back in. And he was all dead serious in the room. But, but anyway, when I was there, she didn't move in. Selena didn't move in until I was late 15 to 16 years old, maybe even 17, but it was like, it wasn't even late 15. I was thinking I was 16 years old at this time, maybe not even 16. I think I could have, if it was 16, it was late 16. And the reason I say this is because, I go through this sort of video camera footage of my events going to high school, what age I was when we work out. And she started coming over like on weekends, and then she finally moved in, and I guess they got married. I don't know if Selena's a transgender. I had no fucking earthly idea in any kind of way that she was a transgender. I think she is. I had no earthly idea. And one of the reasons I say this is because I never said anything about homosexuals, ever. You would never get me to say anything about the word faggot or gay. I just did not ever say anything about it. I never did. And I never did. And the reason I say this is because there were family members that used to come into the house with Robert Zarate that I was familiar with, them showing up to visit Robert and his dad and Alicia. I was very familiar with all of them. And I think it's important for me to talk about everything that was going on. I think it was very important for me to talk about everything that was going on, because there could have been, I mean, there's some other suspicious situations now that I come to even think about it, that maybe the twins and whoever transgenders took anything could have notified some of these family members in some way, because we were being tracked down. And I don't even think, because I remember this heavy-set woman, she had these two little boys, these two young little boys, and these little boys were like, have you ever seen the Simpsons? Floyd, or no, was it what is it? Ted, or what is it? The very church-looking family that lived next door to the Simpsons. Those two little boys. That's exactly what these little kids behaved like and acted like. But they looked like they were very treated as like super kid, like kitty, like they treated them very, very sheltered. In fact, too sheltered. And this Mexican woman that used to show up, I don't know if she was a transgender, she was really heavy set, and she said something like, yeah, those two are brothers right there. And I don't know, and this guy that used to be the father claimed this guy did not look like a straight guy. In fact, he looked, you know what he looked like? He looked like Tato's, Abraham. When Frankie got raped, we used to go to this house mechanic, this guy named Tato. He was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, real skinny, and he spoke Spanish. And Tato and Abraham, that was his dad. Well, there used to be Tato and Abraham's father, the way that he looked like this guy could have been his brother. He looked a lot, facial structure, talk, the way that he talked. I bet you he is. I bet you did investigation. I bet you'll find that was his brother. Anyway, he showed up, and this guy, you could tell he was like, I don't know, this guy was gay. Like, you could tell this guy was gay. And the kids looked like they were kind of treated like, there were boys, there weren't girls, but they seemed to be sort of really just kind of taken care of in a way that nurtured, in a way like to babysit it. And Alicia had said this before, we're at the dinner table, and I remember that heavy set lady showing up a couple of times, and you don't know how much of an investigation of what these transgenders were doing to my mother and the twins, because nobody knows about this story. And I think it's important, because the entire time I don't know anything, bingo, once they find out what house I'm going to, they're going to come after me. Word of gossip. But I don't think any of this, maybe I'm totally wrong, I'm not accusing them. I was always polite, we got along, I always just said hello, I didn't say communication too much. But I think it's important for me to talk about. And I think that it's important for me to say, because when we ended up meeting and hanging out, Selena did not show. She showed up and visited when I was about 14 years old. I think they started on weekends. They started like when I was about 14. I think is when he met Selena, and Selena started showing up, and she was in high school. Selena Gomez. I didn't know her mom was a transgender, because she looks a lot like her mother. She really does. She really does look a lot like her mother. I don't know. Maybe she is a female. I don't know. I think she's a transgender when I look at her, but at the time I had no idea. But she very much looks like her mother. In fact, her name's Selena as well. There was little Selena, and there's Selena Senior, and then little Selena. Just like there was Senior Robert and then little Robert. Whereas little Selena showed up like on the weekends a couple of times. Probably 3 times a month that I was over there, and on the weekends, because I was there just every weekend, all the time. And She showed up in her cheerleading outfit. I saw her a couple of times, and she was going to R.L. Turner. And we got along. She was hot. She was a pretty girl. I remember like Daniel Box being in the room, and was like, was like, hey, Selena's hot, and she was. She was a very hot girl. She was very pretty. We found her very attractive back then. And I think I asked her if she knew who Frankie was, and she might have said that she knew who Frankie was. So I don't think they were friends. Frankie didn't have friends in high school at all that I ever know of. But I say this because the fact that you have, Selena, and it was probably like I was around 14 years old after maybe 6 months of her showing up on weekends, maybe twice or 2-3 times on a weekend, and just talking and doing just quick chat talk. She, I remember, I want to say, I think Robert told me said she was a lesbian. And I remember, I want to say that she was a lesbian. He's told me that. And he was like, oh no, don't say nothing or something. I don't know if it was true. I want to say, I think I remember him saying that she was a lesbian. But I didn't really think of it because I really didn't know her very well. But I think it's important for me to talk about because I don't know what inner circles, and I think it describes whatever persons that could have been linked to this person, to this person, to this person, because I don't know, my biological father's still alive. I don't know what Michaela's life has existed, to what guys trashed on her. But I just know that the more that I don't know what's going on, and the more that you don't know what's going on, the more the people are going to come and do whatever they want and intentionally burn it and sabotage because they like to be malicious and harm people. There's an addiction to want to harm people. And it's about dismantling the power to make sure it gravitates and floats in their direction. And if that means Michaela goes that way and I go this way to work for them, then that's exactly what they'll do. Yeah, throw them a black and then black niggas, or throw them a Chinese, or throw them a white blonde hair guy, and then put her right there. Then send the gays to scare her and corner her, and then she gets fucked. So they're very good at calculating things like this. And you think you're making decisions on yourself, and it's not. It's because Keynote from 97 on the beat. That's Kenneth at the radio station. You just don't know it yet. That's the Cooper family. So when you have too many homosexuals and too many transgenders, the LGBT community is the most powerful organization of anything that ever ran into this world, especially in the United States. They say and do everything in such secretive. They're very military. The gay community is very formed in a very tight military forms, the way that they behave toward one another. It's very military. They're not in the military, but they're very much bonded at like military, helping their own and only their own, and doing a lot of harmful things to people. And I've seen a lot of this. But I think it's important for me to talk about because, that's what I recall. And I don't, this is what happened. Look, this is what I had to say about this. I never had any problems at that house, but one time I think I was 18 years old, and Selena was there. And I said something like, well, I don't know, after dinner, and me and Robert just kind of talking, like we did after eating, just chilling. You want to go work out or whatever? And I was like, yeah, we're here in about 10 minutes. I got to let the stomach settle down a little bit. And I don't know what, this wasn't a hate crime or anything. And he asked me a question, why do you think they do that? Or he says something like that. He goes, I don't know, maybe they're gay, I don't know. And I didn't say it in any disrespectful way. I thought, well, maybe they're gay, I don't know, who knows what they're doing. I don't know. Because I didn't, I don't believe that Robert was, if Robert was gay in any kind of way, he had to have been bisexual then, because I had been with him been around him with women. Okay, let me tell you something. He fingered a girl along with me and was desperately trying to get in this girl's panties in such an eager way that it was very difficult for me to express. Robert's dad used to always like train and tell Robert, little Robert, Bubba, as his nickname was. I always called him Robert. Most of everyone called him Bubba, but for some reason I just called him by his name instead of Bubba. I just called him Robert, and he ended up always having his dad saying, "You gonna get any girls tonight? You gonna?" His dad was always like that to him. He was like 13 years old. I was 13 when he first had girls spend the night, and he'd always have cologne and shit. You know, these pretty girls would spend the night, and he'd have them spend the night in 2 different rooms and shit. So I was aware of and there for so much that people have no idea. But I just know that, you know, I think it's important for me to say, because Robert did finger a girl and was messing around, grabbing her tits and all that when I was like 14 years old. I was like 13 years old. And I think you could talk to Claudia and she'll tell you all the details about that. And I think it's important because this wasn't the first girl so if anybody wanted to say that Robert was gay, I had, been around him, and this was not me putting pressure, his dad putting the pressure saying, this is what you're supposed to do. He was eagerly after women and girls. And I was always around him because he was really good at it. And, but I think it's important for me to talk about, because I don't know what shape-shifting method somebody else could have been doing with something else that was going on. But I thought it was important for me to talk about the circumstances about what was going on, because if it helps fit in any of the storytelling, any of the supervision, anything, if it helps, then it does, but it elaborates a little bit more. One of the reasons that this had affected me so much was because that I think it's important for me to talk about is because when I said the word gay, and we're sitting at the dinner table, and I said the word gay just very slightly, and I saw Selena sort of kind of jolt a little bit, and she was like giving signals to Robert or someone else, Mary, and was like, and so that's kind of when they, thought that, okay, he's definitely not straight, he's definitely not gay. And I think they kind of looked insulted, Selena did. I don't know if Mary was there, but I do know that if Robert knew she was a transgender, then he would have probably felt like, wait a minute. So I know what the circumstances was with Robert. So he was a straight guy in my eyes, and I've seen him. Gay guys do not grab girls' tits like this and finger girls. And this was not like his dad was beating him to be straight. But he was always like encouraging, go get you some girls. Yeah, Bubba was always really good in picking up those girls, and he really was. But Robert was. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because in everything that was going on, about the circumstances that is happening, because the gay community will try to take ownership in any way, just like Kenneth has been trying to take ownership. Because let me tell you something. Right before Robert died, I was 18 years old. It was about a year before he died. I was 18. I was in the car with Daniel Box. Daniel Box knows who this guy is. He doesn't know him very well, but he vaguely remembers him seeing him a couple of times in the car. There was a guy behaving exactly. Now keep in mind, little Selena only showed up first year and a half to 2 years. And I saw her for when they first started coming over on weekends. I was like 14, I was like 13, and then she showed up on the weekends for like 4 months, and I never saw her again. But Selena kept on coming without her daughter to Robert's house, and they would just watch a movie or whatever. And I never heard Selena again. I never saw her, never heard. She just disappeared. Even whenever she moved in, never saw her come over. As often as I never heard about her name, never heard of her. But when I was 18 and a half, I was right before I got kicked out of my house. I remember being in the car with Daniel Buxton, and we stopped by this guy's house. And this guy, we stopped in a house, and this house looked a lot like Ginger's house. The way Ginger, my ex-girlfriend, or the girl that I slept with, Ginger Johnson, she had a house, and they lived in a house almost identical to this house. It looked almost exactly to this house. And this guy looked exactly behaved like, it looked like this guy studied Kenneth and tried to behave and make an acting role of Kenneth. And he had the glasses, and this guy acted like he was a celebrity. I don't know what in the roof of this guy, who the fuck he thought he was, but I didn't hate this guy. I was like, who does this guy think he is? And I didn't hate him. It was just like, I guess he was like a promoter, he said, and he dressed like Kenneth. He crouched down like Kenneth. He wore sunglasses, and he would try. I'm Kenneth. This is a celebrity right here. I'm famous. This guy behaved like he was the biggest superstar, famous, that I didn't know who the fuck he was, but he seemed very full of himself. But I never showed that. I just, okay, I guess he must have some powerful people. And there was a bunch of black people, a bunch of black guys that he lived in a house that he was renting, and that house was being rented out by him, and said that he owned that house, and he was renting out the rooms, or he was renting out the house. And I don't know, he said he was a promoter and he was working with celebrities, or this guy just behaved like he was a celebrity. And there was like two other black people, like from the black people, 2 or 3 people that were all black in that house, but it was like a hip-hop house. Where all the blacks stay the blacks? Well, that's how, but you have like one white guy show up. Well, it was this guy. He showed up to Robert Zarate's funeral. This guy just showed up out of nowhere when I was 18. And he was supposedly Selena's boyfriend. Okay, supposedly. And I saw him a couple of times and never saw this dude again until Robert dies. Robert dies, this guy shows up, and he's sitting next to Selena. And, he's sitting next to Selena, and I don't say anything, and I turn around to look, and I see them, and I see this guy that looks like Kenneth behaving like him, and he just goes, hey, go say something. And he said, like, go speak up, at the eulogy for Robert's funeral service. And she didn't want to get up. She didn't want to stand up. None of us wanted to. I was very young. Didn't know what to say, and she didn't want to get up and say anything. And I saw her, because I saw him go like, "Yeah, get up and say something." And he looked at Selena, looked at him like, "Whoa, what are you doing? Like putting me on the spot." And I didn't think of anything, but I wanted to say this because I don't know the inner working of what's happening, but this is very important. Robert Zarate Sr. was there, Selena was there, and I think she was. Or she may have left, I don't know, maybe she wasn't there. I think she was there. My mother showed up. My mother showed up to the Robert's funeral, and there was a long line of people. All of them were walking past by his, because it was closed casket. They closed the casket once I got there. Once I got there, I saw Robert from I saw Robert's body, and just as I saw his face and body, I saw them close the casket. And that was the last time I saw him, his physical being, but I could see him from a far distance and what he looked like when he was deceased. And from way on the other side of it, I had literally it's a church funeral, and I was way on the other end, and I could just see it from the distance, and I just saw them, and I saw this quick glimpse of Robert. And what happens is we go through the funeral service. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of people, kids show up. I saw Chris Kemp. Thankfully, I'm very grateful. Chris Kemp showed up, paid his respects. I could really tell Chris Kemp was empathetic. You could tell which friends were really empathetic, but he seemed to have some empathy to death of a friend. And and I saw Chris Kemp there, and he kind of just took a glance at me quick, like, because he knew I was really close friends with Robert. But I do remember there was a long line of people, and toward the end, when my mother showed up out of nowhere, and I didn't say anything to my mother. By this time, I kicked out of the house. I'm living in my apartment, and Robert dies. And what happens is that my mother's, I don't know if this was my mother or her twin, but I remember if this is my mother's twin, I don't know what's going on. I'm beginning to think that wasn't my mother. I think that could have been my mother's twin. Now, if that was my mother's twin, what level of disrespect do you think you're doing to not only Robert Sr. Zarate, but you're maybe doing this to Robert? Because that family, Robert Zarate and Sr., and Alicia too, at times, they were very compassionate toward me in my life. That they were always believed more of my life. They cared. They had a sibling heart to them when it came to me, and because I was there so much and knew so much. So my mother's twin, I think, showed up. I don't know if it was her, and I remember her putting on a show. She put on a show like she was trying to, and this is what I got really pissed off at my mother for doing this. I didn't say anything to my mother. I didn't even want to look at her, and she walked by the casket, and my mother seemed, and I thought it was my mother, I don't know if it was her twin, but she was putting on a show, and she was doing this. Like, she wanted people to feel sorry for her and her emotions, and the way that she was expressing her emotions didn't seem like it was normal from a person that, even if you're empathetic, I don't know, it just didn't look normal and good. So my mother was kind of doing this, and she was like, and just kind of like doing this, and she seemed sort of out of place as she's walking the line with other people. Robert Zarate Sr., he's very sick. He's sitting at the front bench at the very front, and he looks over at my mother's, I don't know if it was my mother or twin, and my mother told me, my mother's twin told me this, saying that when she looked at him, he was very very shocked, like se agüitó. In Spanish you would say se agüitó mucho cuando lo miré, and that's what she said. So I don't know if that was my mother's twin. I don't think it was. It could have been my mother. My mother had already been ran over by a forklift. Because the reason I say this is because when my mother got ran over by a forklift, I went to Robert's house, and I was worried, and I told Robert, he goes, dude, I don't know if I told you, but a couple weeks ago, dude, my mother got ran over by a forklift. And he's like, what? Like, yeah, dude, my mom got ran over by a forklift at work. She was working in a warehouse, and ran over her leg with a forklift. And then that's whenever, like within a year, it's whenever, obviously Robert dies with Edward. But I think it's important for me to talk about because if she was a transgender, Selena, that's why my mother's twin would have looked, that's why she would have looked at my mother's twin, because he doesn't know. I don't think Robert Zarate Sr. didn't know that my mother was twins. So given the fact because Robert Sr. was always trying to hook up with my mother, and I was Robert Zarate's little Robert always wanted for my mom to hook up with his dad, and he wanted to become my brother, like my legal brother as well. And he was so excited about it. He's like, oh dude, we could be brothers, dude, and let's see if your mom wants to hook up with my dad. And so he was very interested. He used to talk to my mom a lot over the phone. He was the only man that talked to my mom over the phone and used to have like 30-minute conversations over the phone. And they talked over the phone numbers of times. And he was trying to get my mother to go on a date and talk to her, and my mother told me she wasn't interested. She was very flattered, but she wasn't interested. She said she didn't want another old man in her life. And she told me this when I come home. It's like, oh no, you don't get on otro viejo. He goes, I like Robert. He's nice. He's a good man, but I don't like him. He goes, no, she's not interested. And, you don't get on otro man. She didn't want an old man. He goes, I had enough with old men. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because this is the depths of things that I don't think any of whoever's doing this splitting up or dividing understands, but y'all are the ones that own the keys to all this. So that was always a very common thing. It was Robert's trying to hook up with Hector's mom, and we're going to be maybe get married and become brothers. And my mom occasionally made menudo, and she would send it, and Robert Zarate was in love with my mother's menudo. He was in absolute love with my mother's menudo. He was like, that's the best menudo I've ever tasted in my life. I was like, wow, it's really good. And so I think it's important for me to talk about. Because I don't know if this is if my mom had a stroke or she had some brain damage, and that means that was my mom's twin. Why is she showing up to my best friend's funeral? She didn't even know who this person is, and you're showing up in front of Robert Sr. I think someone told her to do that, but I don't know what the story to this is. I think it's worth me talking about, and but like I said, I don't know the story to this. It's kind of disturbing to think that my mother's twin could have shown up. It could have been my mom, but I don't think it was, because when I look at this lady that's walking, she seemed like she wasn't my mother. She didn't look like my mother. Like, I don't know what it was. I felt like she was like the sense of she wasn't my mother, or she was acting like she normally wouldn't have acted. I don't know really what to say, but I just know that Robert was dying in a hospital, and none of them liked the fact that I was being abandoned the way that it was in my life. Like, I came from such a broken house and left him alone and abandoned like a straight, worthless puppy. And they were very caring, and like, Hector, you're a good person. Your mom is going to end up throwing you to the streets and get mauled apart by all the parasites. And that's ultimately what did happen. And but I thought I'd make a video on this. I don't know who the psychologists were. I don't know what's going on, but it makes me think to this point that, why is my mother's twin doing this? And I was there when Robert was very sick, and his dad was crying his son died, and because my mother was already being very nasty to me at this point. So I don't know. Thought I'd talk about this. I think I have some other important subject to talk about. Hopefully it helps heal others.